Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video.
Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Black Jewelries and join us for more powerful.
Funny. Have you ever sat in a room where every single person around you had already decided who you were, and you were the only one who knew they were wrong? Funny. Before we go back to the beginning, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever been the person nobody bothered to look at twice, hit the like button. Funny. That's the only thing I'll ask of you until the end. Everett Lowe signed the visitor log at the Ashcombe Tower in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina at 8:37 in the morning. Funny. First line on a fresh page, real name, no title beside it. 14 days later, a courtroom stenographer would type that same line into an official transcript, and a grown man in a tailored suit would go pale reading it back to himself. Funny. Everett Lowe owned Caro Freight Systems. Not a stake in it, not a controlling share he had to defend at quarterly meetings. Funny. All of it held through a company called Briarwood Holdings, a name that meant absolutely nothing to anyone who bothered to look it up. Funny. And almost nobody who drew a paycheck from Caro Freight had ever once seen his face. That was on purpose. Funny. He ran the business out of a converted trailer office at Brantley Yard, 19 miles south of the tower, in a room that smelled like motor oil and the last pot of coffee somebody forgot to dump. Funny. One window. It looked straight out onto the loading dock, and he liked the sound that made dock better than he liked most conversations. The hiss of air brakes, the chain rattle, the particular shout a driver gives when a trailer sits 4 inches off the wall and he needs it to stay there. Funny. His father had made that sound for a living. Hollis Lowe loaded freight for the company that would one day become Caro for 28 years, back when it was 4 trucks and a gravel lot and a hand-painted sign nailed to a fence post. Funny. He came home most winters with his knuckles split open, and he never complained about it where his son could hear him. Funny. He gave Everett exactly one piece of advice in his whole life, delivered once, leaning against the hood of a Ford in a parking lot the way men of his generation handed down anything that actually mattered sideways, and only ever once. Funny. Son, if a man has to say his own name to get treated decent, then whatever he built wasn't worth building in the first place. Funny. Everett started at the bottom of that same company at 21. Night dispatch, out of a portable building with a space heater that tripped a breaker every time somebody plugged in a microwave. Funny. He left 6 years later, not because he wanted to, but because a manager in a press shirt sat him down and explained, in the gentle tone people use when they think they're protecting you from yourself, that customers on the phone tended to respond better to a certain kind of voice. Funny. Nothing that could ever be written down. Nothing ever is. So he built his own thing out of a spare bedroom with a laptop and a landline, and it took him 12 hard years to get there. Funny. 2 years ago, his holding company quietly bought out the very freight line that once let him go, in a private deal that never made a single headline. Funny. He didn't put his name on the building. He didn't hang a portrait in the lobby. He told the board, flatly, that he had no interest in being a story, only in whether the trucks ran on time and whether the people driving them got paid. Funny. 2,600 employees across 11 terminals worked under that company, and most of them believed it was owned by some faceless investment group 2 states over. Funny. There was no welcome video. There was no name on a plaque. There was only a signature at the bottom of every paycheck, small and tight and blue. E. Funny. Low. In 2 years, not one soul on the executive floor had ever wondered whose hand had written it. That mattered more than it sounds like it should, because Caro still processed payroll the old-fashioned way. Funny. Twice a month, the file had to clear under a strange, stubborn rule buried in the company bylaws, the kind every efficiency consultant flagged in the first 10 minutes of every presentation. Funny. The controller built the file. The payroll director verified every line against the terminal logs. And then the sole authorized signer had to physically countersign a paper release, in person, in ink, inside the building, before the bank's 6 o'clock cutoff. Funny. It was an antique. Everett kept it anyway, because twice a month it forced him to hold, on one printed sheet, the exact number of human beings, depending on him small enough font to feel humbling every single time. And that same clause had one more line in it that had never once mattered before, because nobody had ever needed it to. On release day, the verifying officer may not leave the room containing the file until the release is complete. That clause was about to trap the one woman on that floor who actually knew Everett Lowe's face inside a windowless office for the better part of a workday while he sat 2 floors above her, and nobody thought to connect the two. Down in a locked cabinet in the basement sat the signature plate that stamped his name onto every check the company printed. Loretta Vance had run Caro's payroll for 19 years, and she kept the cabinet key on a chain under her cardigan where she could feel it against her collarbone. That Thursday was the 10th of the month, release day. There was a leather folder in Everett's truck that morning, and inside it were 3 letters that had reached Brantley Yard over the last 4 months. 3 different handwritings, one in ballpoint on notebook paper, one typed on a shared terminal deliberately in a font nobody could trace to a single machine. One in pencil on the back of a dispatch sheet from a terminal he still couldn't identify, all 3 unsigned. All 3 saying some version of the same sentence: if you're nobody, you don't make it past the 14th floor. He'd read them enough times to know them without looking. He'd done the thing you do with a complaint you can't verify, turned it over, sat with it, asked himself honestly whether he was hearing about a building or hearing about somebody's bad week. So he booked a 9 o'clock with Preston Wade, his division president, 11 days out, under his own plain name and no title, because he'd never once used a title in his life. The signature was the reason he had to be in that building. The 3 letters were the reason he wasn't going to open his mouth. He parked in a visitor spot at 8:31 because the reserved spaces along the east curb had names stenciled into the concrete, and none of them were his. Dark work jacket folded over one arm, a thin leather case with 3 letters and 1 blank authorization sheet inside it. Boots polished that morning at his own kitchen table, though the heels still carried a pale ring of dust from Brantley Yard, because that dust never fully comes out, and after a while you stop trying to get it to. His father's old steel watch sat on his wrist, crystal scratched from decades of use. The Ashcombe Tower lobby was cold in the particular way expensive lobbies are cold polished stone, a fountain nobody ever actually looked at, and a security desk with a leather visitor book squared perfectly on its corner. Behind that desk stood Otis Marsh, 61 years old, uniform pressed sharp, reading glasses pushed up into his gray hair where they lived most of the day. 9 years at that desk. 9 years, which meant Otis had started work at Ashcombe 3 full years after Everett Lowe had already walked away from the old company for good. He had never once seen the man's face. He had no way on earth to recognize him. He slid the book across without being asked. "Morning, sir. Who are you, Preston Wade, 9 o'clock. Everett wrote it himself, first clean line on a fresh page. Lowe, 9 Lighty P. Wade arrived 8:41. Otis wrote guest 14 on a clip badge in blue ink and slid it across, then logged the same number in the badge column beside the name, the way he did 400 times a week without needing to look twice at his own hand. 14th floor, elevators on your left. He tapped 2 fingers on the counter once the way a man sets a stamp down. Bring that badge back to me when you're through, sir. I keep count. I will. He didn't. And a plastic clip badge that never came back down to that desk is the only reason there's a story to tell at all. The 14th floor smelled like fresh carpet glue and citrus cleaner. A reception desk sat in front of a glass wall, and behind the glass wall was the boardroom frosted doors, a long table you could see the outline of but never the faces around it. Brooke Sandner sat at that desk, 24 years old, white headset, 3 monitors glowing in front of her. "Oh, hi." "Sorry, are you here for the loading dock? Because that's around back off Kessler Street. I only ask because people come in here all the time, and it's honestly not marked great." He set his case flat on the counter and left his hand on top of it. "I have a 9 o'clock with Mr. Wade Lowe, Lowe. Okay, yeah, 1 second." She typed it. Her eyes tracked the screen. Funny. She typed it again, scrolled, and her eyebrows drew together, doing the thing almost every one of us has done at some point in our working lives. Funny. When the screen disagrees with the human being standing in front of you, you believe the screen. I'm not seeing anything. Funny. That doesn't mean it didn't get confirmed, though. Sometimes things just don't sync right. Are you sure it went through? Funny. 11 days ago, she glanced at the frosted doors, then back at her monitor and chose the monitor. Do you maybe want to have a seat and I'll go check? Funny. She never checked, so he sat, third chair from the boardroom door, the only one with a clean line of sight to the elevators. Funny. He folded his jacket across his knees, set the case on top of it, both hands flat, back straight, feet planted. Funny. He would not move from that position for the next 8 hours. At 9:03, Renata Cole came through the glass door with a phone in one hand and a coffee in the other, moving fast. Funny. Sir, deliveries go around back. Her eyes went down boots, the pale dust ring, the case, the face under 2 seconds, start to finish, filed and closed. Funny. I'm not delivering anything. I have a 9 o'clock. There's no 9 o'clock. She said it already passed him, over her shoulder, the way you answer a call you don't plan on staying on. Funny. Review day. Leave a card with Brooke. I don't carry cards. That turned her head just once. Then you can wait. Funny. It was the only time all morning she looked at him directly. At 9:12, Preston Wade walked past the chair lid off his coffee, folder under his arm, talking to 2 men in quarter-zip pullovers about a boat somebody's brother-in-law had bought down in Georgia. Funny. He passed within 3 feet. He glanced down. His mouth came open, maybe half an inch, like he very nearly said, "Has anybody grabbed this gentleman?" Funny. The way a man throws a thing over his shoulder for somebody else to catch. His phone buzzed against his hip. Funny. He kept walking. That was the closest that building came to ordinary decency for the next 7 hours. By 9:20, the boardroom filled 12 people. Frosted doors swinging shut, the shapes of a projector's glow moving behind the glass. Funny. He could hear laughter without a single word of it. Here's where people watching this lose their patience with him, so let's be honest about it together. Funny. He could have ended it right there. There was a phone in his jacket pocket. One call to the corporate secretary and that door opens inside 90 seconds and stays open for good. Funny. 2 words to Renata Cole. He said none of them because the reason was sitting in a leather case on his knees. Funny. 3 letters. 4 months. 3 different hands. The same sentence. He'd asked himself in the truck that morning what he was actually there to learn, and the honest answer wasn't comfortable. Funny. He was there to find out what happens to a man with no title and no name anybody recognizes. And the second he said his own name out loud, that answer was gone for good. Funny. So he sat. At 10:14, the desk phone rang, and because the lobby was quiet, he heard both halves of it. Funny. 14, this is Brooke. A pause, then her voice climbed half a step, the way it does when you're repeating something for the second time and trying to be helpful about it. Funny. No, ma'am, I promise I've been at this desk since 8. There's nobody here by that name. That was Loretta Vance calling up from the payroll office 2 floors down. Funny. It was the first of 11 calls she'd make that day. Every single one got the same answer, and every single one was wrong. Funny. His own phone had been on silent since 8 that morning, sitting in his jacket pocket underneath his hands, and it stayed there. Funny. He'd come to watch, not to be found. At 11:09, Renata came through with an armload of binders and stopped short. Funny. You're still here. My name's on the first line of the book downstairs. His voice hadn't moved all morning, not louder, not sharper, not 1 degree warmer than it had been at 8, which is exactly what got under her skin, because being ignored is one thing and being corrected is a completely different animal. Funny. Nobody reads that book, that's for the fire marshal. She walked off, heels striking the stone floor like a clock running fast. Funny. At 11:26, the elevator opened, and a man stepped off with no appointment at all, quarter-zip pullover, boat shoes, laptop bag over one shoulder. Funny. He hadn't signed anything downstairs, because Otis Marsh knew his face and waved him through with 2 fingers. He told Brooke he'd been in the neighborhood and thought he'd catch Preston. Funny. She didn't type anything. She didn't check a single thing. She stood up, walked 11 steps across the carpet, and opened the boardroom door herself. Funny. Somebody inside said the man's name warmly, the way you say a name you're actually glad to hear. 90 seconds. Funny. Elevator to handshake. Everett Lowe timed it because a man who has been sitting in one chair for 3 hours has nothing else to do with his attention. Funny. Then he opened the leather case, folded back the inside cover, and started a column down the margin in blue ink. Funny. Not names, he didn't have their names, just times. Who came up, who got collected, how long it took. The first entry read in full, 11:26, quarter zip, no book, no badge, 90 seconds. Funny. 2 weeks later, an outside investigative team would begin 2 full years of forensic work, starting from that single column of handwriting. Funny. 2 floors down, Loretta Vance was sweating through her cardigan. 56 years old, barely 5 feet tall in her flats, a tissue tucked up one sleeve, a key on a chain around her neck. Funny. The payroll file was built and verified line by 11 that morning, 2,600 people, 11 terminals, every hour of overtime, every deduction, finished and correct. Funny. And it could not move 1 single inch without a signature, in ink, in that building before 6. She couldn't leave to go find him. Funny. The bylaw she'd worked under for 19 years said so in plain language. The very clause Everett Lowe himself had refused to kill, 3 years running, over the objections of every consultant who'd ever walked through the door, was now holding the one woman who knew his face captive 2 floors beneath his chair. Funny. At 11:47, Preston Wade stepped out to take a call, standing 8 feet from that third chair with his back to it. Funny. No, we're good, we're wrapping the deck this afternoon. He laughed at something, rocked back on his heels. Funny. Yeah, apparently, there's a walk-in camped in the lobby since like 8 this morning, which I mean, that's a choice. Funny. No idea. Some guy. He said it lightly, the way you say a sentence you'll never remember saying, because there was no person in it as far as he was concerned. Funny. Everett Lowe heard every syllable from 8 feet away. His hands didn't move on the case. At 12:10, the catering cart rolled up a dozen boxed lunches under foil, a coffee urn, a tray of cookies under a paper doily. Funny. The kid pushing it couldn't have been more than 23. He stopped, looked at the man in the chair, looked at the boardroom, looked back, doing the arithmetic on who counted around here. Funny. You with them, sir? 'Cause I've got 2 extra. That was the second closest that building came to ordinary decency all day. Funny. It lasted about 4 seconds. He's not with the meeting, Renata said from the doorway, without breaking stride, answering a question nobody had asked her. Funny. The kid didn't look up again. The doors shut behind the cart, and the smell of hot food sat in that hallway a long time afterward, the way food smells do in a corridor with no windows. Funny. Everett had eaten half a granola bar in the truck at 6 that morning. He didn't get up, because somewhere around 11 he'd worked out that the second he stood, the chair would become available, and that chair was the only physical proof he had that he'd ever been in that hallway at all. Funny. By 4 o'clock, Preston Wade had walked past him 9 times and never once looked down. At 1:35, a facilities worker came up with a hand truck full of folding chairs, because the client walkthrough at 5:30 needed the good seating pulled and staged. Funny. He got as far as the 3rd chair and stopped because someone was sitting in it. Sorry, sir. You can sit over there. Funny. Renata pointed at the freight elevator alcove without looking up from her phone. I need this line clean. Funny. The alcove had no window, one flickering fluorescent tube, a wire shelf of cleaning supplies, and a mop sink that smelled like bleach. Funny. Everett stood up, picked up his jacket and his case, walked around the corner and unfolded a metal chair with a bent front leg. Funny. He set it down. Then he picked it back up, carried it the length of the hallway, and set it in the exact square of flattened carpet where the good chair had stood 10 minutes before. Funny. You could still see the 4 dents where the legs had pressed in. He sat down facing the boardroom door, back straight, jacket folded on his knees, both hands on the case. Funny. Renata watched him do it from 20 feet away and said nothing. There was nothing in any handbook for it. Funny. And because of the way he'd done it, without hurry, without a single word, without looking at her, once she found that she badly wanted to be somewhere else in the building. Funny. At 2:05, Brooke's headset lit up again. 14, this is, her hand went over the mouthpiece, her voice dropping as she caught Preston walking past with two of the quarter-zip men. Funny. Sorry, it's payroll again. They're saying they need a signature before 6 or Friday doesn't run. She sounds pretty upset. Funny. Then payroll should solve payroll, right? He didn't slow down, didn't turn his head, said the rest half over his shoulder like a joke he'd made before. Funny. That's literally the job. He said that 4 feet from the only hand on earth that could sign the sheet. Funny. At 2:22, a group chat lit up on 6 phones. It was called 14. Renata opened it, with a photo taken through the glass wall, the back of a man's head, one shoulder, the corner of a folding chair. Funny. Still here, 6 hours. He brought a folder. Somebody give the man a mop, let him feel useful, I'm deceased. Funny. 6 adults with corporate titles. 11 months of message history between them, and in 9 hours, not one of them ever typed the 3 words, who is he? Funny. At 3, Everett looked at Father Scratched watch and gave himself a deadline. 5:30. He knew the numbers better than anyone in that building. Bank cut off at 6, Loretta needing 12 clean minutes to release the file once ink hit the page. Funny. If by 5:30, not one person in that entire building had done the ordinary thing, a call, an open door, a single question, he'd end it himself. Funny. He wasn't gambling with 2,600 people's paychecks. He was gambling with exactly one thing, and it belonged to him. Funny. At 3:08, the elevator opened, and Otis Marsh stepped off holding a cold bottle of water from his own lunch cooler. Funny. Nobody had sent him. He'd come up on his own break, because a badge log doesn't lie. Guest 14 had gone up at 8:41 and never come back down. Funny. In 9 years at that desk, Otis had never once let a badge sit that long without going up to check on the person wearing it. Funny. He crouched down, knees popping, so he wasn't standing over the man in the chair. You've been up here a while. Funny. I have. He held the bottle out and didn't ask if it was wanted. Just held it there until it was taken with both hands. Funny. They feed you? No. What's your name? Everett looked at him 1 second longer than he needed to. Funny. Everett. Mr. Everett. Otis nodded slowly, twice the way a man nods when he's deciding something inside his own chest and hasn't finished deciding it yet. Funny. I can knock on that door right now. No, sir, thank you. You sure about that? I'm sure. Funny. Otis stood, hand on the small of his back, and looked at the frosted glass a long moment with an expression Everett would think about for the rest of his life. Funny. All right, I'm gonna write down that you're still up here, though. He carried that word back down to the leather book in his own hand. 3:10 p.m., guest 14, still on floor 14, no escort, advised. Funny. Otis Marsh was the only person in a building of 380 people who asked that man his name all day. Funny. At 4:12, Renata came out with her coat already over one arm. We're wrapping. He's got the client thing at 5:30. Funny. My appointment was at 9. It's 4:12, she said, and smiled at that, tilting her head, explaining a closed road slowly to somebody from out of town. Funny. Sir, take the hint. Preston Wade came out of the boardroom with his overcoat over one arm and stopped directly over the folding chair. Funny. The catering cart rolled out behind him, stacked with dirty plates and crumpled foil. Renata stopped it with one hand, lifted the top tray and set it down on the carpet at Everett's feet. Funny. Kitchens by the freight elevator. Be a dear. At 4:49, Preston Wade dropped his overcoat across the man's lap. Funny. Hold this, buddy. Flash on. The photo hit the group chat 11 seconds later, 3 laughing faces underneath it. Funny. Everett folded that overcoat neatly along its seam, the way you fold a coat you fully intend to hand back. Funny. He set it on the empty chair beside him and didn't say a single word. At 5:08, Renata picked up the house phone and dialed the ground floor. Funny. Hi, there's a man in our lobby who's been here all day and won't leave. Can somebody come walk him out? Funny. Everett put both hands flat on the case and shifted his weight forward to stand. It was 5:08. His deadline had 22 minutes left in it, and he didn't need them. Funny. He'd had his answer since noon. The rest was arithmetic. Then he heard the elevator chime behind him, and he gave that building 22 more minutes, not because he still had hope, but because the one person in it who might still do the right thing was on his way up. Funny. Otis Marsh stepped off because he was the only officer on the floor. He took the room in all at once, the folding chair, Renata with her coat on her arm, and the house phone still in her hand, a tray of dirty plates on the carpet, with a fork lying beside it. Ma'am, this man signed in at 9 o'clock this morning. First line, I don't care what the book says. He didn't raise his voice. He said it again, the way you'd read a number off a gauge. It's the same book everybody signs. Are you refusing to do your job? I'm telling you what's in the log, ma'am. Then maybe you shouldn't have a log to write in. Preston Wade came out then, tie loosened, drink in his hand, because the walkthrough had turned into a cocktail hour. He took in the scene the way you take in weather. What's the holdup? Security's got opinions, sir. The man signed in, come on. Nobody's been sitting out here all day. That doesn't happen in my building, man. He was looking directly at Everett Lowe when he said the word nobody. 9 days later, in a room with a court reporter present, that would be the sentence that ended him. Everett stood up out of the folding chair, 6'2" in flat boots, and both men stepped back half a step without deciding to. I want the visitor book from the front desk, the original, not a copy. Behind them, the elevator chimed again. 2 floors down, Loretta Vance stopped dialing. She sat 4 seconds with her hand still on the receiver, then closed the file, locked the payroll room door for the first time on a release day in 19 years, and rode up to beg an entire executive floor to help her find a man every one of them had sworn wasn't in the building. She got 2 steps out of the elevator and froze. Mr. Lowe, the temperature in that hallway changed all at once. Oh, thank God. Sir, I've called 9 times. Your cell went to voicemail twice. They kept telling me you weren't here. Give me the sheet, Loretta. She'd processed his time cards when he was 21 years old, running night dispatch out of a portable building with a space heater that tripped a breaker. She'd have known the back of his head in a packed room. He laid the authorization flat on the seat of a bent metal chair and signed his own name, 5:41 in the evening, small tight blue letters, E. Lowe, the same signature, cut into a steel plate 2 floors below. I'm sorry, who is he? Brooke asked from behind the desk. Loretta turned and looked at Renata Cole the way you look at someone who's just asked what color the sky is. He owns the company. 4 seconds is a very long time in a hallway. That's not. Preston started and stopped because his mouth had gotten ahead of the part of his brain that had just quietly begun doing arithmetic. Sole shareholder. Chair of the board, Loretta said because somebody had to. He signs the release himself every 15th and 30th for 2 years. Everett handed the sheet back. Go. You've got 14 minutes. Yes, sir. She went at a half run and the elevator doors closed on the sound of her saying thank you. Everett took his phone out of his pocket for the first time in 9 hours. He didn't raise his voice. He hadn't all day, and he didn't start now. A deal. It's Everett. I'm on 14. Nobody leaves this floor, not the executive team, not reception, not catering. Bring me the visitor book from the ground floor by hand, the original, not a scan. Freeze the badge log and today's calendar history. Call legal tonight, at home. The voice on the other end didn't ask a single question. It said, understood, sir, and was gone. Preston Wade had gone a color that doesn't have a name. Mr. Lowe, listen, there's obviously been a communication breakdown here. Brooke, pull today's calendar. Not what it shows now that changed history, she typed. Her face went pale in stages, forehead down. There was a 9 o'clock booked 11 days ago. It was still on the schedule at 6 this morning. It got moved to hold at 8:52 by Renata. The note field says, she made herself finish it. Walk in, no title, 8:52. 11 minutes after a man wrote his real name on the first line of a leather book downstairs. I didn't know who you were, Renata said. I know you didn't. At 8:52, you had my name on your screen. You typed over it. He turned to Preston Wade. Take out your phone. Open your last pay statement. Sir, I really don't think that's open it. And everybody in that hallway watched a grown man scroll to the bottom of his own pay stub with his thumb shaking, down to small, tight blue script above the line that read authorized signatory. E. Lowe, I've signed off on your paycheck 61 times. You cashed everyone. You never once read the bottom of the check. And today I sat 18 feet from your door for 9 hours, and you called me nobody in front of a security officer. Preston Wade sat down. He didn't choose to. There happened to be a chair behind him, one of the good ones staged for the walkthrough, and it caught the backs of his legs. 9 hours doesn't make me a criminal. No, it doesn't. You're not in trouble for who I turned out to be. You're in trouble for who you decided I was at 8:41 this morning. The visitor book came up at 5:53, carried by hand by Otis Marsh, who set it on the counter and turned it to face the man the same motion he'd made at 8:41 that morning, for a stranger he didn't know at all. Everett read the first line out loud in a hallway where nobody was breathing. Lowe, P. Wade, arrived 8:41. Badge 14. Then the notes column, later handwriting 3:10 p.m. Guest 14, no escort. Advised, thank you for writing that down. It's just a log, sir. Otis didn't take his eyes off the page. I write down what I see. That's all it's for. By the following week, every page of that log was sitting in a case file, the only honest record in the entire building of what had actually happened, that Thursday kept by a man who had no idea, in 9 years, that's exactly what he'd been doing the whole time. Preston Wade had started talking, and once he started, he couldn't find the break. He'd been in a quarterly review since 9:15 straight through, no eyes on the lobby all day. The calendar wasn't something he touched. That was Renata's function, the entire reason her role existed. If a 9 o'clock got moved to hold at 8:52, that hadn't come from him, and he wanted that on the record. Here's the uncomfortable part. Every word of that was true. He'd never heard the name Lowe, never seen it on a calendar. Never once read it on a check. That was the problem. That had always been the problem. Renata turned and looked at the man she'd been engaged to since March. You said let him sit. This morning, before anyone checked anything, you looked at that desk and said, let him sit. I want to see how long he lasts. Nobody in that hallway ever forgot the sound of a woman handing over the man she was going to marry. 9 words under 3 seconds. Nobody had even asked her to. You're both suspended, effective now, pending an outside investigation. Don't touch your phones except to hand them to legal. Don't delete anything. Badges on the counter. They rode down 14 floors in silence and came out into a stone lobby where Otis Marsh stood behind his desk with the book open. He slid it across without a word. Preston Wade signed his own name in a leather book on his way out of a building he'd run for 6 years, and Otis wrote the time beside it without looking up. 6:11. Upstairs, the tray of dirty plates sat on the carpet where it had been set down. A facilities worker came around the corner at 6:20 and reached for it. Leave it. It sat there overnight under a hallway light that never gets switched off, a fork resting on the carpet beside it. At 8:15 the next morning, an investigator photographed it from 4 angles with a ruler in the frame. That photograph is the second exhibit in the report. The first exhibit is a page from a leather book. 2 floors down at 5:53, with 7 minutes left before the bank's cutoff, Loretta Vance released the file. 2,600 people got paid on Friday. Not one of them ever knew how close it came. The outside investigators took 14 days, and the first thing they found was a business card sitting in a drawer at the security desk, untouched for 11 months. It belonged to a woman who owned a small trucking outfit 1 county over. She'd had a confirmed appointment on the 14th floor once, waited 5 hours and 40 minutes, then asked Otis for a pen, written 2 words on the back of her own card, and gone home. I understand. When investigators finally reached her, she said she'd rather not participate. She said she wasn't interested in being a story. She said she just wanted to know somebody had finally read the card. After that, they went to the book. 2 years of pages, every arrival time, every badge number, cross-referenced against the badge. Return log Otis Marsh had kept in ballpoint the entire time, without one single person upstairs ever asking to see it. The pattern came out of it like a bone out of an X-ray. 88 visitors had signed that book with confirmed appointments on 14 over 2 years. 17 were never collected, not late, never. They sat, eventually gave up, and walked out, dropping numbered clip badges on the counter on their way. Average wait for a visitor who actually got walked into that boardroom, 6 minutes. Average wait for those 17, 3 hours and 51 minutes. 14 of the 17 were Black or Latino. Otis had flagged 11 of them in his notes column with the same single word he'd used that Thursday afternoon. Advised. In 9 years, nobody had ever come down and asked him what that word meant. And here's the part of the report people skip, and shouldn't. The pattern ran 2 full years, which meant every one of those 17 people had sat in that lobby and given up under Everett Lowe's own ownership in a building he'd deliberately never put his name on. The lead investigator asked him about it on day 6, not as an accusation, just a scoping question, the kind you'd ask about where to draw the line on a document request. How far back do you want us to go? The working file notes that the answer took him a while. What he said, eventually, was all of it. Legal advised him to keep that section out of the public version of the report. He printed it anyway, unredacted, page 9. He said later that the letters had been arriving at Brantley Yard for 4 months before he ever got in the truck, and that 4 months is also a number somebody could put in a report. Then they got the phones. The group chat called 14, ran 11 months and 406 messages, and it traveled faster than anything else in the case because it didn't need a lawyer to explain it. On day 5, Renata Cole gave a sworn statement with counsel present and gave up all of it: the calendar change, the note field, the tray, the photograph, times and all. Nobody asked her to repeat the sentence from the hallway. 3 other people had already put it in their own statements. Preston Wade sat for a deposition on day 9 and made it worse the way people who have always been fine tend to make things worse. He said he'd been in a review. He said the calendar wasn't his function. He said he'd never intended anything by any of it, and anybody who knew him would say the same. Then counsel read 2 words back to him off a witness transcript, the 2 words he'd said into a phone at 11:47, 8 feet from a chair. Some guy. Who did you think he was? He didn't have an answer, not a bad one, not a defensive one, none at all, because in 9 hours, he had never once spent a single second on the question. Counsel asked the second one and let the silence sit. If you'd known who he was, would he have waited? No. He said it fast, before he understood what he'd just admitted. There's a transcript somewhere with that one syllable sitting completely alone on its own line. On the 14th day, the board of Caro Freight Systems met in that same boardroom, with the frosted doors, standing room only. Terminal managers had driven in from 3 states. Drivers came in on their day off in clean shirts, holding their caps in their hands. Loretta Vance sat in the second row with the key on its chain outside her cardigan for once in 19 years. The first item on the agenda wasn't a vote, it was a reading. Everett asked Otis Marsh to come to the front, and he did, pressed uniform, glasses up in his gray hair. He opened the leather book and read 17 lines out loud. Name, date, time and badge number. Time the badge came back down. Nobody moved. When he reached the line that read low, 841, badge 14, a man in the back said, "Oh my God," out loud into a silent room. Otis kept reading, because there were 3 more names after that one. Then the board voted. Preston Wade was terminated for cause, which cost him a severance package, unvested stock, and an industry seat he'd been campaigning for since spring. The company clawed back his prior year bonus, and he didn't contest it, because contesting it meant a hearing, and a hearing meant that transcript with the word "no" sitting alone on a line. Renata Cole was terminated the same afternoon. 3 of the 17 filed formal complaints once the report went public, and Everett gave legal the shortest instruction of his career. Don't fight them, not one. Pay it. Apologize in writing and put my name on the letter. There was one more thing read out loud that day, the shortest of the 3 letters, the one written in pencil on the back of a dispatch sheet by somebody at a terminal he still couldn't name. We're not asking for anything. We just want to know if the people at the top know we're down here. Everett read it once, set it down on the table, and said one sentence to a room of 110 people. They know now. The last thing that board did was pass a policy 9 words long, and it has never once been amended since. Every guest in the book is greeted by name. The book doesn't live at the front desk anymore. It lives open on the boardroom table on 14, where anybody sitting down at that table has to look at it. Otis Marsh didn't get promoted. Asked what he wanted instead, he said he'd like to keep his desk. Then he said the other thing he'd been carrying for 9 years. He wanted a second officer on nights, so nobody in that lobby ever sat down there alone again. He got both. He also got the job of walking every new hire through the book on their first morning, and he does it the same way every time. Opens it to a Thursday in the spring, points at the first line, steps back and lets them read it themselves. The wedding had been set for October. It never happened. Preston Wade sells industrial equipment in another state now for a company with 9 employees. Everett Lowe still runs Caro Freight out of a trailer office 19 miles from the tower, with one window that looks out at the dock. His name still isn't on the building. There's still no portrait in that lobby. The manual signature clause is still in the bylaws, and every consultant who looks at it still recommends killing it, and he still says no, twice a month. There's a metal folding chair with a bent front leg standing in the corner of his office. He's never once explained it. People ask twice, sometimes 3 times, and then they stop asking. His father told him once, leaning against the hood of a car in a parking lot, that if a man has to say his name to get treated decent, then whatever he built wasn't worth what he thought it was. He still believes the first half of that completely. He's added something to the second half, and he says it on the loading dock twice a year, into a microphone he doesn't really need. You shouldn't have to say your name. But if you do, say it late, and say it for the ones behind you who never got the chance to. For 9 hours, he was just a man in a folding chair. 380 people walked past him that day. One of them crouched down and asked him his name. In a building of 380 people, the only thing nobody ever read was the name of the man signing their paychecks. So here's the only question left tonight. Who's sitting in your lobby right now, and does anybody there actually know what to call them? Tell me in the comments. If this one got to you, drop a like and send it to somebody who needs to hear it. And subscribe so the next one finds you too. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.